The email arrived in corporate inboxes 12 months before the explosion. This site will likely kill someone in the next 12 to 18 months. On March 23, 2005, at precisely 1:20 p.m., 51,900 gallons of flammable liquid erupted from a 1950s-era vent stack, proving every single one of those warnings right in the most catastrophic way possible. Linda Rowe had forgotten something that morning. Her husband James's glasses. They'd been married since they were young, raising 2 kids in a trailer home on a dirt road in Hornbeck, Louisiana. Population 500. They worked together at the BP Texas City Refinery for contractor J.E. Merritt. James as a construction superintendent. Linda in the toolroom. On March 23, Linda walked to the temporary double-wide trailer where James was working to deliver a pair of forgotten glasses. She would never leave. The BP Texas City Refinery sprawled across 1,200 acres on the southern edge of the Gulf Coast. One of the largest refineries in the United States, capable of producing 3% of the nation's gasoline supply, 11 million gallons per day. The facility had been built decades earlier, inherited through mergers and acquisitions. Amoco first, then BP. By 2004, the refinery was generating over $1 billion in annual profit. More than any other refinery in BP's global system. By early 2005, $100 million per month. But beneath the record profits, the Texas City refinery was dying. Equipment dating from the 1950s still in operation. Safety systems years overdue for inspection. Maintenance deferred. Budgets slashed. Between 1974 and 2005, 39 workers had died at the facility. 1 fatality every 16 months on average. 3 workers killed in 2004 alone. The year before the disaster. Don Parus knew what he was walking into. In 2002, BP transferred him from their London headquarters to serve as site director at Texas City. One of his first actions, commission an outside safety audit. The report came back damning. Serious concerns about the potential for a major site incident due to the large number of hydrocarbon releases. Over 80 releases in the 2000 to 2001 period alone. Mechanical integrity issues. Overdue inspections. The audit recommended $235 million in upgrades. It's unclear whether those upgrades were ever made. But the audits kept coming. 2003, 2004, each one noting the same problems. Each one ignored. At the close of 2004, the refinery's most profitable year ever, BP London gave Parus a budget challenge. Cut $65 million from the plant's $300 million operating budget. Parus pushed back. According to his later deposition, he fought the cuts. After several rounds of negotiations, BP reduced the demand to $48 million. Still a massive reduction for a facility already running on deferred maintenance and outdated equipment. Parus made his concerns clear. In fall of 2004, he traveled to BP's corporate headquarters in London with a PowerPoint presentation. The title, Texas City is not a safe place to work. The presentation included photographs, pictures of workers who had died at the plant, faces, names, lives ended by preventable accidents. In an emotional meeting, Parus showed these pictures to BP executives Mike Hoffman and John Manzoni. According to BP's own internal investigation, Parus portrayed to them that there was a huge cultural issue at Texas City on safety. The executives listened, then sent him back to Texas with the budget cuts intact. Even as the plant's profits continued climbing, reaching nearly $100 million in January 2005 alone, Parus sent an email to his staff. 2004 was not a positive year for Texas City safety. He cited 3 avoidable deaths and a major fire. He called for a 2-day leadership meeting that can and must be a turning point for the safety performance of this site. That same month, January 2005, the Telos Group delivered what was probably the most damning internal report ever to emerge from the Texas City refinery. Parus had hired the outside auditors to survey the workforce. They interviewed hundreds of workers, surveyed over 1,000 employees. The findings were catastrophic. The plant's employees had an exceptional degree of fear of a catastrophic incident. Blindness across the entire corporation prevented critical safety information from reaching top levels of BP management. The conditions at the plant created hazards you would never encounter at Shell, Chevron, Exxon. The report included direct quotes from workers, their voices, their warnings. The heroes around here are the ones working to the production goals and who complete them early. Units are 90% of the time run to failure, due to postponing turnarounds. So making money or saving money for that particular year looks good on the books. This is a serious safety concern to operating personnel. We do not walk the talk all the time. Costs and budgets are preached to reduce costs. Parus shared the Telos results with BP executives Pat Gower and Mike Hoffman at a Houston hotel. According to his deposition, it didn't seem to be a shock to them. He left the meeting without getting increased support. In March 2005, refinery managers outlined key risks facing the facility. One risk assessment stated plainly that plant workers would avoid reporting some safety incidents, in fear of consequences. Another prediction was even more direct. The Texas City site kills someone in the next 12 to 18 months. The clock was ticking. The isomerization unit, known as ISOM, was a critical component of the refinery's gasoline production process. Its job? Boost the octane level of gasoline through a chemical process involving flammable naphtha. The unit had been shut down for a month-long maintenance turnaround. Routine but necessary work. Restarting an ISOM unit after maintenance is one of the most hazardous operations in refinery work. The industry knows this. Every refinery knows this. Startups are when accidents happen. The restart was scheduled for March 22. It didn't happen, delayed to the 23rd. The night shift began the process. At 2:13 a.m. on March 23, operators started filling the raffinate splitter tower with hydrocarbon liquid feed. This tower, essentially a massive distillation column, needed to maintain liquid levels between 50 and 80% for safe operation. But multiple systems had already failed. The high-level alarm on the tower's control board, inoperative. It had calibration issues. No one had repaired it. The external sight glass, the backup visual indicator that would allow operators to physically see the liquid level, stained black. Years of improper maintenance had rendered it useless. The level transmitter, the electronic gauge showing operators how full the tower was, faulty, providing incorrect readings. So the night shift operators filled the tower blind. For over 3 hours, they pumped hydrocarbon liquid into the raffinate splitter with no liquid flowing out. No accurate way to measure the level. No functioning alarms. No visual confirmation. By the time the day shift arrived at 6 a.m. on March 23, the tower was already dangerously overfilled. But the day shift didn't know that. Because the handover never happened properly. The experienced day shift supervisor arrived over an hour late. He didn't conduct a handover with any night shift personnel. The only information in the control room logbook was a single cryptic entry. ISOM brought in some rafter unit to pack RAF with. The day board operator misunderstood. He thought this meant only the tower had been filled. He didn't realize the entire system had been running for hours. At 10:50 a.m., the more experienced day supervisor left the control room. A family emergency. Contrary to operating rules, no supervisor was designated to replace him. A single, unsupervised, exhausted board operator was now left to oversee the ISOM restart and monitor 2 other units simultaneously during one of the most critical and dangerous operations in refinery work. At 9:55 a.m., 2 furnace burners had been lit to preheat the raffinate going into the tower. At 11:16, 2 more burners were ignited. The procedure called for heating the tower slowly. The required temperature for the tower reboiler return flow was 135 degrees Celsius. The rate of increase, 10 degrees Celsius per hour. Maximum, but the procedure wasn't followed. By the time the liquid reached the tower, the temperature had hit 153 degrees Celsius. The rate of increase, 23 degrees Celsius per hour. More than double the safe limit. Physics took over. Heat causes liquids to expand. The hydrocarbon liquid in the already overfilled tower began expanding rapidly. Pressure spiked. From 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., the faulty level transmitter showed the tower level declining from 97% to 79%. The day board operator thought this was normal. He believed it was expected to see the level drop as the tower heated up. He was catastrophically wrong. The tower wasn't dropping, it was filling. The actual liquid level in the tower had reached 30 meters, 15 times the normal operating level of 2 meters. But the faulty transmitter showed 2.64 meters and decreasing. The operators noticed pressure spikes. They tried to relieve the pressure, but they focused on the symptom, not the cause. They didn't realize what was happening. None of the ISM operators knew the tower was overfilling. At 1:14 p.m., the pressure relief valves did exactly what they were designed to do. They opened. Liquid hydrocarbons poured out of the overfilled tower at a rate of 509,500 gallons per hour. In 6 minutes, 51,900 gallons of flammable liquid discharged into the blowdown drum. The blowdown drum, a pressure relief system dating from the 1950s. Antiquated equipment that should have been replaced decades earlier. BP had been warned repeatedly. In 1991, Amoco's refining planning department proposed eliminating atmospheric blowdown systems. Funding was not approved. In 1992, OSHA issued a citation to Amoco for the unsafe design of a similar blowdown system elsewhere in the refinery. Amoco successfully persuaded OSHA to drop the citation. In 1993, the Amoco Regulatory Cluster Project again proposed eliminating atmospheric blowdown systems. Again, funding was not approved. Despite Amoco's own Process Safety Standard No. 6, which specifically prohibited new atmospheric blowdown systems and called for phasing out existing ones, in 1997 Amoco replaced the 1950s-era blowdown drum serving the raffinate splitter tower with an identical system. Not an upgrade, an identical replacement. In 2002, engineers had an opportunity to tie the ISM relief system into a new, safer flare system. The cost? $150,000. The upgrade was rejected. Also in 2002, BP's Clean Streams project proposed converting the blowdown drum to a flare knockout tank and routing discharges to a flare. When engineers discovered that a required relief study of the ISOM system had not been completed due to budget constraints, the project was abandoned. That required relief study, mandated by federal regulations. On March 23, 2005, it was 13 years overdue. Between 1994 and 2004, at least 8 similar incidents occurred where flammable vapors were emitted by the ISM blowdown drum and vent stack. 2 of those incidents resulted in fires. No corrective action was taken after any of these warnings. Now, on March 23, 2005, the antiquated blowdown drum was overwhelmed instantly. 51,900 gallons in 6 minutes. The drum had no chance. Flammable liquid erupted from the atmospheric vent stack like a geyser. Witnesses described it as shooting into the air. A fountain of volatile hydrocarbons. The stack, designed to handle gases, not liquids, couldn't contain the flow. The liquid spilled onto the ground, pooled around the ISM unit, vaporized in the March heat. A massive flammable vapor cloud formed. Invisible, odorless, deadly, it spread across the refinery grounds. Drifting, expanding. All it needed was a spark. At 1:20 p.m., the vapor cloud found its ignition source, most likely a running vehicle engine. The explosion was instantaneous. Witnesses across Texas City heard the boom, felt the ground shake, windows shattered nearly a mile away. Judith Mantle looked to the sky. It was unbelievable. The flames shot more than 70 feet into the air. I've never seen flames that high from anything. They were bright orange, with yellow on the side. In town, schoolchildren ducked beneath their desks. About 43,000 residents were ordered to shelter in place. Debris rained down from the sky. Black smoke plumes visible from Clear Lake to Galveston. At the BP Texas City Refinery, the explosion ripped apart 1,200 acres of industrial infrastructure. But the workers operating the ISM unit, they survived. Every single one of them. Because all 15 people who died that day were nowhere near the ISM unit. They were in temporary trailers. Contractor trailers. Office space. The closest trailer was 121 feet from the explosion. Company policy stated that occupied trailers should be placed no closer than 300 feet from processing units. But Don Parus, the site manager, testified later that he was unaware of this policy. Before March 23, I didn't get involved in policy. I left that to the organization. I relied on my organization for that. The trailers had been placed in late 2004 to accommodate contractors working on another unit. A management of change assessment had been started for the double-wide trailer. It identified that the structure would be less than 350 feet from the ISM plant, a distance below which a dedicated risk analysis was required. The team carrying out the assessment lacked the expertise to complete the risk analysis. The recommendations issued in the analysis were still open when the trailers were occupied in November 2004. 9 single trailers were added later. No management of change assessment was conducted for those at all. Inside the largest trailer, the double-wide, Dave Lenning heard a weird sort of banging. He went to look out the door. The explosion pushed him to the ground. A fireball swept over the building. Lenning found himself trapped under a pile of rubble and an unconscious coworker. He could move only the fingers of his left hand. He tapped his communicator, issued a distress signal. "I'm still here." Morris King died only a few feet away from where Lenning was pinned. Another colleague, Larry Thomas, who had been leaning against the trailer wall, was killed instantly. James and Linda Rowe were in that trailer. James was there for work. Linda had just arrived to deliver forgotten glasses. Both were killed by blunt force trauma when the trailer collapsed. All 15 fatalities occurred the same way. Not from burns, not from the explosion directly. From blunt force trauma, the trailers disintegrated, structure and contents became projectiles. Flying metal, collapsing walls, crushing debris. Ironically, the contractors in those trailers had just returned from a safety lunch. A celebration, 1 month without a lost time injury. Ralph Dean, working in the debris field, found the body of his father-in-law only a few feet from Lenning. Then he discovered his wife, Elisa, pinned under a metal bookshelf. Barely alive. Tyrone Smith was burned over 87% of his body. When asked later how he survived, he said, "I closed my eyes, and I asked God not to let me die." In Hornbeck, Louisiana, Eva Rowe was trying frantically to reach her parents. She called the plant, called hospitals, called relatives, visited a neighboring worker. At 4 a.m., she was told unofficially that her parents were presumed to be among those killed. The next day, BP advised families of the missing to go to the Charles T. Doyle Convention Center in Texas City. There, next of kin were escorted to the coroner's office. Eva Rowe was too upset to view her parents' remains. She filled out paperwork, physical descriptions, medical records. By the end of the day, James and Linda Rowe had been identified through dental records and DNA. Eva Rowe was 20 years old. That was the end of my life as I knew it. The investigations began immediately. The U.S. Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, the CSB, arrived on site within 48 hours. 13 investigators remained for 3 months. The CSB reviewed more than 30,000 documents, interviewed 370 witnesses, performed computer modeling and testing, used a budget of $2.5 million. The resulting report, published on March 20, 2007, was 341 pages long. The most extensive investigation the agency had conducted in its 9-year history. The conclusion was unambiguous. Organizational and safety deficiencies at all levels of the BP Corporation caused the March 23, 2005, explosion at the BP Texas City Refinery. CSB Chairman Carolyn Merritt stated it even more bluntly. The problems that existed at BP Texas City were neither momentary nor superficial. They ran deep through that operation. Risk denial and risk blindness that was not being addressed anywhere in the organization. The report identified the immediate technical causes: the overfilled raffinate splitter tower, the inoperative alarms, the faulty level indicators, the lack of supervisory oversight, the inadequate training, the outdated blowdown drum. But the CSB made clear that targeting the mistakes of BP's operators and supervisors missed the point. Simply targeting the mistakes of BP's operators and supervisors misses the underlying and significant cultural, human factors, and organizational causes of the disaster. The blowdown system was antiquated and totally inadequate. But BP had known this for years. Decades. The warnings had been explicit. The recommendations clear. The costs relatively minor. $150,000 to upgrade to a flare system in 2002. Rejected. While the refinery generated $1 billion in annual profit. BP's own internal Management Accountability Project report identified 4 executives for dismissal. Pat Gower, Regional Vice President for U.S. Refining. Mike Hoffman, Group Vice President for North American Refining and Marketing. Texas City Complex Manager Don Parus. And Willie Willis, Texas City West Plant Supervisor. All 4, the report stated, failed to perform their management accountabilities in significant ways. But it later transpired that Don Parus had tried to warn his superiors. Tried to highlight the poor safety conditions. Tried to stop the budget cuts. He was put on indefinite leave in May 2005. He remained on BP's payroll at $279,000 per year as of September 2007. He testified later that he had little hope of returning to work, given what he called the company's minimal communication with him. Meanwhile, BP's top refinery executive, John Manzoni, gave a deposition. He was asked directly, before March 23, 2005, you had no idea there was a risk of catastrophic injury? Manzoni's answer: no. I think had I been aware that we could have had a catastrophic failure, we would have taken action earlier, different action. This despite the fact that Don Parus had personally briefed Manzoni on numerous occasions about the state of the union at Texas City. Despite the Telos report. Despite the 2002 audit. Despite the workers' warnings. Despite 3 fatalities in 2004 alone. BP's own internal investigation found that for Manzoni, process safety did not have the same priority as commercial issues. In July 2005, BP commissioned an independent panel to assess the company's corporate safety oversight and safety culture across all 5 U.S. refineries. The panel was chaired by former U.S. Secretary of State James A. Baker III. 10 independent experts. Over 150 interviews. Thousands of documents reviewed. The Baker panel report was released on January 16, 2007. Its conclusion: significant process safety issues exist at all 5 BP U.S. refineries. The issues were not unique to the Texas City refinery. The panel found weak safety culture driven by poor process safety leadership and low employee empowerment. BP's comprehensive safety management system was not sufficiently enforced in their refineries. The panel stressed that BP's focus on measuring safety relied overwhelmingly on occupational safety indicators. Slip, trip, and fall accidents. Lost time injuries. These metrics missed the catastrophic risks entirely. Worker fatigue and the system that encouraged overtime had detrimental effects on safe plant operation. OSHA conducted 17 inspections, issued hundreds of citations. In 2009, OSHA levied an $87 million fine against BP, the largest in OSHA's history at that time. The fine was for failing to repair the safety problems that led to the blast. Between 2007 and 2011, OSHA launched an unprecedented nationwide emphasis program. Inspectors carried out investigations at 58 different refineries. On average, they found 17 violations per inspection, levied $166,000 in fines at each. The program was discontinued. Lack of resources. Inspecting refineries took an average of 1,000 hours versus 25 hours for a normal review. Criminal charges limited. In 2008, BP Texas City refinery manager Keith Casey, Don Paris's successor, pleaded guilty to a felony charge of violating the Federal Clean Air Act. The company paid a $50 million fine, put on probation for 3 years. No other company officials ever faced criminal charges. This remains a source of anger for victims' families. Eva Rowe refused to settle quietly. BP attempted to reach an agreement, but Eva told them no. She spoke to CBS's Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes before the trial. "If we settle, everything we know has to remain confidential. I don't want that to happen." Just before the trial was to start, Eva and BP did reach a settlement. But the terms were extraordinary, unprecedented. BP would have to release internal documents about the accident to the public. And BP agreed to Eva's demands to donate $32 million to funds that Eva would administer to better the lives of oil workers. $12.5 million to the blocker burn unit in Galveston, where Tyrone Smith and nearly 24 other BP victims had been treated. $12.5 million to the Mary K. O'Connor Process Safety Center at Texas A&M. $5 million to the College of the Mainland in Texas City for safety and process technology training. $1 million to St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, James and Linda Rowe's favorite charity. $1 million to Hornbeck High School, where Linda had been a teacher's aide. In addition, Eva received an undisclosed personal settlement. When reporters asked if she could ever forgive BP for what happened to her parents, she replied, "I'll probably never say BP is a good company." 10 years after the explosion, a reporter spoke to Eva again. She was brutally honest about the aftermath. "I don't give a fuck about the money. I would rather live on welfare in a trailer in the woods in Louisiana with my parents than live in a mansion." The decade since her parents were killed had included suicide attempts, ongoing bouts with depression, and anger at anything connected to BP. "BP fucked me up. BP ruined my life. I spent $2 million for rehab. I've never been sober since this happened. Not once." She missed her mother's voice. She used to keep her mother's mobile phone account active just so she could call and hear Linda's voicemail greeting. Eventually, she couldn't afford to keep the account anymore. "I miss my mom and dad very, very much. I don't even remember what they sound like." Eva had a daughter, 5 years old at the time of the interview. The girl lived in California with members of Linda Rowe's family. Eva believed, for then, that it was for the best. "My daughter is safer not being with me." The money she received each year from the settlement didn't last long. "The money ruined my life. I became all about the material things. I forgot where I came from. And I have no real friends. When people call, I just answer, 'How much?' All anyone calls me about is to ask for money. I go out and blow it just so I can say I don't have any more money." Eva believed that her settlement with BP, and the release of damning company documents, would lead to direct action against company officials. Criminal charges. Prison time. It didn't. "I want to put people in prison. BP's managers never really paid for what they did. 20 years after the explosion, attorney Brent Kuhn, who represented Eva and many other victims, was asked if there had been meaningful change in the industry. His answer was blunt: "No, I don't think there's been any change. The drivers to an erosion of safety concerns in the petrochemical industry are multifaceted. It stems first from, at the end of the day, an improper moral compass." Another main driver, Kuhn said, was lack of sufficient oversight and regulation. The industry is, generally speaking, a deregulated industry. While there's lip service to heightened regulation, it is understaffed, and most of the things they do in the industry are focused on general personal safety as opposed to process safety management. Brian Ambrose is one of just a few employees who worked at the ISM unit that exploded in 2005 and continue to work at the refinery. The facility is now owned by Marathon Petroleum. BP sold it in 2012. Ambrose believes that American refineries are ignoring lessons learned from the disaster. That the Texas City plant itself risks repeating that horrible day. At his shift meetings, Ambrose takes to the whiteboard and writes, ISM. Shorthand for the unit that exploded. He snaps his fingers. It can happen like that. Then he reminds his crew. We don't make ice cream. Everything we work around will kill you. Between 2005 and 2011, 7 additional workers died at BP refineries, including 4 in Texas City ahead of the sale. In 2022, at the BP Husky refinery near Toledo, Ohio, an explosion and fire burned 2 brothers alive. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board investigated. Their report, issued in 2024, described BP's decades-long, chronic inability to learn from its many mistakes. The Texas City refinery's business plan for 2005 had predicted it explicitly. The site would likely kill someone in the next 12 to 18 months. On March 23, 2005, at 1:20 p.m., that prediction came true. 51,900 gallons of flammable liquid erupted from a 1950s-era vent stack. A vapor cloud formed, ignited, exploded. 15 people died. 180 were injured. All because BP chose to make $1 billion instead of $998 million. All because $150,000 was too expensive. All because warnings were ignored. Audits dismissed. Workers silenced. Maintenance deferred. Profits prioritized. James and Linda Rowe went to work that day. James to supervise construction. Linda to deliver forgotten glasses. They never came home. Dave Lenning heard a weird banging. Went to check. Survived under rubble by tapping "I'm still here" on his communicator. Morris King and Larry Thomas, only feet away, did not survive. Eva Rowe lost both parents in an instant. At 20 years old, her life ended as she knew it. The money couldn't fix it. The settlements couldn't heal it. 2 decades later, she still can't remember what her parents sound like. Don Parus showed BP executives pictures of dead workers. Warned them in PowerPoint presentations. Fought budget cuts. Commissioned safety audits. Shared the Telos report that predicted catastrophe. He left those meetings without increased support. Later, he was put on indefinite leave. Never returned to work. BP's top refinery executive, John Manzoni, testified under oath that he had no idea there was a risk of catastrophic injury before March 23. Despite being personally briefed by Parus. Despite the audits. Despite the warnings. Despite 3 deaths in 2004 alone. For Manzoni, BP's own investigation found, process safety did not have the same priority as commercial issues. The Chemical Safety Board spent $2.5 million investigating, reviewed 30,000 documents, interviewed 370 witnesses, published a 341-page report. The conclusion? Organizational and safety deficiencies at all levels of the BP Corporation. The Baker panel investigated BP's corporate culture across all 5 U.S. refineries. Their conclusion? Significant process safety issues exist at all 5. OSHA levied $87 million in fines, the largest in the agency's history, for failing to repair problems BP had known about for years. One executive pleaded guilty to a felony, paid a $50 million fine. No one else was charged. No one went to prison. The blowdown drum that failed on March 23, 2005, dated from the 1950s. BP had been warned in 1991 to eliminate it. Warned again in 1992. Warned in 1993. In 1997, they replaced it with an identical system. In 2002, they rejected a $150,000 upgrade, while making $1 billion per year. Between 1994 and 2004, 8 similar incidents occurred. 2 resulted in fires. No corrective action was taken. The required relief valve study was 13 years overdue. The high-level alarm was inoperative. The sight glass was stained black. The level transmitter was faulty. The operators were untrained for startup scenarios. The supervisor arrived late. No replacement supervisor was designated. A single exhausted operator was left to manage a critical startup alone. The trailers were placed 121 feet from the explosion. Company policy required 300 feet. The site manager didn't know the policy existed. Warnings ignored. Procedures violated. Maintenance deferred. Budgets slashed. Profits prioritized. 15 people died. 180 were injured. Lives destroyed. Families shattered. 20 years later, Brian Ambrose still works at the refinery. Still writes, ISM, on the whiteboard. Still snaps his fingers. Still reminds his crew. Everything we work around will kill you. The Texas City refinery proved him right. On March 23, 2005. At 1:20 p.m. when 51,900 gallons of flammable liquid erupted from a vent stack that should have been replaced decades earlier. When corporate profits mattered more than worker safety. When warnings were ignored. When $150,000 was too expensive. When 12 to 18 months became a countdown to catastrophe. Linda Rowe delivered forgotten glasses. James Rowe went to work. Dave Lenning heard weird banging. Morris King and Larry Thomas stood in the wrong place at the wrong time. 15 people who went to work that day never came home. Because BP knew. The audits told them. The workers told them. Don Parus told them. The Telos report told them. The internal risk assessments told them. And they did nothing. The sky over Texas City turned orange that day. 70 feet of flame. Black smoke visible from Galveston. Debris raining down. Windows shattered a mile away. 43,000 residents sheltering in place. And in a double-wide trailer 121 feet from the explosion, 15 lives ended in blunt force trauma. Eva Rowe can't remember what her parents sound like anymore. She spent $2 million on rehab. Hasn't been sober since it happened. The money ruined her life. But she'd trade it all. Live in a trailer in the woods in Louisiana with her parents rather than a mansion without them. That's what $150,000 in savings cost. That's what happens when warnings are ignored. When workers are silenced. When profits matter more than people. When a refinery site predicts it will kill someone in the next 12 to 18 months, and corporate executives do nothing to stop it.